Welcome, everybody. I'm Day Wilson of FODMAP Every Day and very excited. We are here with the team from FODZYME. We are going to jump right in. FODZYME is an enzyme blend that can help you digest FODMAPs. With me today are Angie Liu and David Hatchwell. They are the developers of the product. We also have Nikki Straley, a registered dietitian who's been using it in her practice. So I just want to get right to it. Everybody wants to know, what exactly is FODZYME? It's a blend of enzymes, right?
Correct. The current formula is a highly specific enzyme blend designed precisely for the FODMAP groups, fructan galacto-oligosaccharides, or GOS, and lactose.
Excellent. So it differentiates from some products that are available over the counter, right? I mean, I think a lot of people are familiar with Beano, for instance. So how do you differentiate your product?
For sure. So there are several solutions on the market that people might be already familiar with, Beano included. FODZYME has two primary advantages here. Our novel fructan hydrolase, which addresses fructan, and that's the stuff found in garlic, onion, wheat, the best stuff.
And statistically, right? It's statistically the FODMAP that is most problematic for people.
Precisely, both the most difficult to avoid and also the one that people are, statistically speaking, most sensitive to. And so going back to our advantages, also the powder form of FODZYME. So let me just break that down a little bit. So our unique enzyme, the fructan hydrolase in the formula, opens up a much wider range of foods beyond those in galacto-oligosaccharides, which is the only FODMAP that Beano addresses. FODZYME is also Monash low FODMAP certified with an elegant formulation of 3 specific enzymes. And back to the powder form, we found that sprinkling FODZYME on food like seasoning is way more effective because it's critical for the enzymes to distribute within the ingested food while your stomach pH range is still optimal for enzymatic activity. And so the longer after the meal, the more threatening your gut environment becomes to these enzymes. And our powder form facilitates maximum enzyme integration into the food, which allows the enzymes to very quickly target FODMAP triggers in the meal.
Well, that's great. I was going to ask you how you actually use it. So you've just said it is a powder form and you're sprinkling it right. Oh, look at that. Okay. So here you have your jar. So talk a little bit more about that. So let's say I'm going out to dinner. I'm going to a restaurant. We all know it's really hard to eat out when we're following the low FODMAP diet. We're probably going to be encountering some high FODMAP foods. I've got my FODZYME with me. So take me through the process.
Awesome. So I show up at dinner. I whip out my, this is the classic form of FODZYME, more on product formats later, but essentially I would just open the jar and there is already a serving spoon for our standard serve of the powder. I take a scoop of that and I sprinkle it directly into the meal, all over the meal. The better you can distribute it, the better it's going to work. And if you can mix it in, that's best. But sometimes, if you're eating a burrito, it's not quite possible to sprinkle it all over, or it's too messy to do that. What we recommend in those cases is to just chew it with the first few bites. So putting it on a little corner and then that helps integrate embed the enzymes into the food that you're eating. And sometimes you can even add a little bit toward the end to kind of replenish that enzyme supply if you can't mix it in or sprinkle it all over the food.
And I read that you suggest not dissolving it in water, correct?
Correct. And the reason for that is just that you're adding an extra step, an unnecessary extra step in getting the enzymes directly onto the food. It's always best to put it directly on the food. That's problematic. However, if it's a drink is high in FODMAP, for instance, it's like a banana smoothie or something like that, add it directly to the drink and then mix it up.
And I would imagine, so you said that's a serving size. So people would start with the recommended serving size. And like so much with the low FODMAP diet, I'm assuming you're going to learn how FODZYME works for you. Maybe you do need that second dose, as you said, at the end of your burrito or what have you. But I'd like to talk to Nikki. So, it seems like it's tempting. If I'm following the low FODMAP diet and I have problems digesting FODMAPs, I would want to be sprinkling it on every meal because I'm afraid I'm going to have breakout IBS symptoms. But you do have some very specific directions for when you would be using this, right? And it's not during the elimination phase, correct?
Correct. So we know during the elimination phase, we want to really limit the FODMAP load and bring it back down as low as possible. So we can really get a chance to see if we can get symptom relief from the low FODMAP diet, because as we know, it doesn't work for everyone. So to make it really effective, we bring those FODMAPs down really low. And then we do, of course, the reintroduction phase, and then comes the last phase, which is personalization. So when you've got the elimination phase, we're taking the FODMAPs out. But once we do the reintroduction and people really know what those trigger foods are, then that's the best time to start to introduce, an enzyme preparation like FODZYME, because then they already know that they're sensitive to onions and garlic and lactose, and then they can particularly, use this product and they can tolerate it, which is awesome.
Excellent. So I think that this is a point we really want to hit home, because it's not meant to take the place of a structured elimination phase. We know that the beginning of the diet can be hard for a lot of people, but it's funny, Nick, I want to know what you think about this. I used to describe the beginning two phases of the diet as hard or difficult, but I've changed my wording to say structured, right? Because you have to have a structured elimination and challenge phase in order to get the information you're seeking. You come out of those phases, like you say, knowing what your tolerance is to garlic, knowing what your tolerance is to lactose. And so then when you're in the last phase, let's say you're going out to that Mexican restaurant, you know that you have an intolerance to garlic. Now you've got your FODZYME. Now you know this is an appropriate time to use it because it can help you digest that meal that most likely have garlic and onion in it. Yes. So let's talk a little bit about, the validation of the product. So this is a supplement. There's lots of supplements and medications out there that we discuss in the FODMAP world. People want to know that they're taking something that is going to work. Now, you mentioned, Angie mentioned earlier, the product is certified, lab tested and certified low FODMAP by Monash University. But what that's telling us is that the actual product, the ingredients in the jar are low FODMAP. That doesn't necessarily speak to how it works. So tell us a little bit about that. Any of you who would like to field that question?
That's an excellent question, and yes, that is actually on the point of the low FODMAP certification. It's not always a given. We've seen products like Beano that actually contain polyols as excipients, so it's not always a given that that's the case. But you're absolutely right that doesn't validate the efficacy of the product when it comes to FODMAP degradation. And so, from the beginning, we're both scientists, Angie and I, and we have obviously an incredible team of scientists that we can talk a little bit about later. But validating and providing a portfolio of evidence about how FODZYME works and its just efficacy and its evidence has been a priority from the beginning. From day one, we actually conducted in-house trials where we fed ourselves and very brave friends and family members something like 30-40 grams of fructan, which, as you very well know, is an absurdly high amount of fructan that will induce symptoms in pretty much any human that you feed that to. And we try to conduct this in the most statistically rigorous way and obtain enough data to convince ourselves that FODZYME really works and that it's something that is worth pushing forward. One of the next big steps that we did in our validation journey was really meant to identify the mechanism of action. How does FODZYME work at a very precise and at the molecular level, really. And so we performed a series of in vitro experiments to validate the activity of the fructan hydrolase, which, as we've mentioned, is our star enzyme, and discovered that when FODZYME was administered, fructan was rapidly broken down into simple fructose and glucose with about 90% of the fructan degraded within 30 minutes. We also found that some of the fermentation markers like short-chain fatty acid production was reduced but not depleted, which means that FODZYME, so the enzymatic approach of FODZYME, is potentially more favorable to overall colonic health than avoiding FODMAPs altogether. And we're particularly proud of this work that was obviously done with a lot of care, and we presented it at Digestive Disease Week back in May in San Diego, which is, for those who don't know what Digestive Disease Week is one of the most important venues in GI research in the planet. And for those who are curious about those results, we have what we call a clinical brief, where you can find both the results of the in-house trials as well as the in vitro work that we perform.
And you have an amazing advisory team. I mean, tell us a little bit about that, because it's all part of how people can really feel, can trust your product. You've got a lot of people behind you with great credentials.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'll start by saying that as a company, so our parent company is Kiwi Biosciences, and obviously the products that we make, like FODZYME, we sit at the intersection of many disciplines like dietetics, gastroenterology, biotechnology, and even food science. And for this reason, when it came to putting together an advisory board, it was very important to attract a diverse group of scientists and healthcare professionals that can advise us in all these complex domains. And to be specific, we're incredibly grateful to have the support of Dr. Tom Wallach, who's a professor of pediatric gastroenterology at SUNY Downstate. We have Dr. William Che, who is a professor of gastroenterology at University of Michigan and a board member of the American College of Gastroenterology and the Rome Foundation, which are obviously two organizations that play a very significant role in the IBS space. And we also have Dr. Tatiana Toro Ramos, who's doctorate in nutritional sciences and worked in the R&D departments at Noom and Seed Health. And one specific thing about these advisors, we see a lot of companies having advisors just to have a name hanging on the website or something like that. We're particularly proud of having advisors that are ready to get their hands dirty and do very specific works, like writing clinical trials and protocols and running statistical analysis and writing manuscripts. So this is something that we certainly don't take for granted.
Well, that is a differentiation for sure. So Nikki, most of the people watching this are going to be like your typical client. They're going to be somebody who's working through the diet. They're dealing with their FODMAP intolerances. So what have you heard? How have you used it in your practice? And what have you heard from your clients?
Well, I think I first heard about it from a client, which is always really interesting, probably about a year ago, I think probably last fall. And I started to pilot it just in a small subset of patients, just because I thought, why not give it a test run? And I remember specifically the very first patient, I barely logged into our Zoom call, and the first thing she said was that FODZYME is amazing. It is totally changing my life. And she proceeded to tell me a story about how she made this family enchilada recipe and she sprinkled her FODZYME on it. And she normally would have really bad GI symptoms afterwards, and she didn't have any symptoms. And she was so excited that she had leftovers. And the next day she put them on her leftovers again, and she again didn't have symptoms. And so she was like, this is miraculous. This is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this product. And so once I kind of opened the door to that, I started sharing it with other patients. Again, right after we finished the reintroduction and we're into the reintroduction phase, because that's really when it's key. As a dietitian, when someone finishes their reintroductions and they say, whenever I have like a little tiny bit of onions or a little tiny bit of garlic, I get really bad, fill in the blank, might be gas or bloating or diarrhea or pain or constipation. And so, as a dietitian, I really want to help them to be successful long term. And so, one option is to say, wow, you're going to have to just keep those things out of your diet for a while and then retest them later. But that's really tough for people. And so when you tell them, another option is to try this product and see if this allows you to eat some of those foods that you know that you've been reactive to. They're like, sign me up. I want to try this for sure. And I found it particularly useful for people who travel a lot for work. So I have a lot of clients that will have, we kind of have to wine and dine their clients. And so they're spending a lot of time at restaurants, and, it's limiting to not be able to eat a lot of these foods. And so to be able to sprinkle some FODZYME on their food, be able to tolerate, this meal that they're eating out with a client, it's really expanded their options. People are taking it on cruises with them. I have a lot, I don't know why, but I have a lot of families that are patients that come from a big Italian family. And so they talk about how, food is life. And so the fructans group is so big and ubiquitous in Italian culture. And so they're like, I take my FODZYME with me to my family gatherings, and I'm able to eat all these, this wonderful assortment of food. And so I feel like it's really exciting to be able to give them an option of something that, instead of saying you can't, or restrict, it's like, expand, try this. It really works. And people are so grateful.
Also, this is a perfect segue to the question I was thinking. So from a medical perspective, is there really any reason why someone shouldn't try this? I mean, if you're at that phase where you've determined your tolerances, I mean, is there any downside to this, Nikki?
I honestly don't feel like there's a downside. I mean, from my perspective, digestive enzymes are really well tolerated. And so I recommend them for patients. And, we've for many years recommended like the lactase enzyme for people who are lactose intolerant. That has been around for 30 years. And so if someone is lactose intolerant, they can take a lactase enzyme. I mean, they can also use, a lactose restricted, product like a milk or something, and that does work. But that's just a single FODMAP. And so we're talking about, FODZYME has the ability to cover for 3 different FODMAP subgroups. And so it's kind of like a broad spectrum digestive enzyme. And so it really just expands the number of foods that they can eat, rather than saying, you can take, Beano or something like it if you're having trouble with gas when you're using something with galactans in it. This is, you can use it for a wider variety of products. And I think diet expansion is always my goal as a dietitian. We really want to choose the widest variety of foods possible. And I think that this product allows us to do that.
So Angie, so polyols are not addressed. So tell us a little bit about that, because you have something coming down the pike, right?
Correct. Our R&D team is hard at work developing a totally new enzyme to address polyols. And then the way that's going to work is by transforming polyol molecules like mannitol and sorbitol into absorbable sugars that will be quickly taken in the gut and won't cause that kind of FODMAP fermentation lower down in the colon. But bear in mind that these types of innovations do take considerable time to both research and develop and scale up. So we have customers actually hearing about this, and then they check back with us like the next month, and they're like, is it done yet? Like, not yet.
Well, a couple years from now, I'm going to have that peach pie slice, and we'll revisit this and find out about the new product. So, okay, so let's just talk about FODZYME. So you have FODZYME, you held up that jar. Let's talk a little bit about how does someone order it? How does it come packaged? Talk about storage, like just all the sort of nitty gritty of the practical use of it.
Absolutely, I can take that one. So, the best way to access FODZYME, especially if you're in the United States, is directly on our website, FODZYME.com. We offer a flexible subscription plan that's designed to ensure that you never run out of FODZYME. You never know when you're going to need it, and we keep getting people that are saying, "Oh, I'm going away on Friday for the weekend," and it's like Thursday. Can you ship something in the next 24 hours? So yeah, the subscription is definitely the best way to make sure you don't run out of it. And plus, if you're on a subscription, you're saving 20% off on every order. And you can always customize, how often you wanted the frequency, and you can skip and cancel anytime. So that is what we always recommend. In terms of internationalization, in the last few months, we've made significant efforts in expanding internationally. That's been one of our priorities, and we've been very fortunate to partner with a number of stockists around the world. And so we can say that right now FODZYME is available through FODShop in Australia and New Zealand. If you're in the UK, United Kingdom, you can get it at FODMarket. And if you're in Switzerland, Germany, or Austria, you can get it at FODCorner. These are, fantastic family-run re and e-tailers that really support us. You also asked about storage. So, the best way to store FODZYME and ensure that it lasts as much as possible is by keeping it in a cool and dry place. I cannot emphasize enough the dry aspect of this. Moisture is perhaps the #1 enemy to enzyme stability over time, and so that is the one thing to avoid. So try not to get wet fingers or anything wet around you on your FODZYME package. And in terms of temperature, room temperature is fine. Even a little higher than that is completely fine. So that's not the biggest issue.
Excellent. And in terms of, so you have the jar, and then are there other ways that it comes?
Yes, this is a very timely question. So the jar I showed earlier is the FODZYME as a jar of 60 powder doses. And this has been the classic format since our launch that our customers have really come to know and grown to love. That said, we totally understand that when you're out and about at restaurants, whipping out a whole jar of white powder might raise an eyebrow or two. And we've gotten our share of feedback on this part. We totally understand it. And that's also not to mention that, when you're at a restaurant, when it's a meal that you didn't cook yourself, you never fully know what and how much FODMAPs are in there. And so that's why we're really pleased to announce that we're launching the new FODZYME on the go kit with single dose stick packs. So not only is it extremely easy to take it with you wherever you go, but we've also added 33% more enzyme power to address those unpredictable in the wild meals. And that's something that's just making available now, that we're just making available now.
That's fantastic. That's great. Well, this has been really educational, and it's exciting. And one more thing before we wrap up, in terms of cost, you do have a money back guarantee, right? So just talk a little bit about that. So as Nikki said, from a medical perspective, really no downside to trying this if you're in your final personalization phase. And then if it doesn't work, or if you want to send it back, how does that work?
Absolutely. And on the financial side also, no risk. So I don't know if this was brought up. I don't think this was brought up earlier, but I'm an IBS patient myself. And before starting the low FODMAP diet, I tried like a million products, like every probiotic thing or herbal supplement under the sun, things that are on Amazon with like 4.8 stars, and everyone's like, oh my God, this is miraculous. And I just bought
all the Facebook ads, right? All
of those ads,
or all of the miracle things that are out there right now.
Exactly. And I spent so much money and none of it worked. And I don't want that to happen for any of our customers. So if for whatever reason it's not the right fit for you, and you gave it a full try, we have a no questions asked money back guarantee.
That's fantastic. Well, there you go, folks. Really no reason not to try FODZYME. It could be the answer for you if you're in your final phase, third phase of the diet. So this Q&A was just meant to be a quick look into the world of FODZYME. We have a much more complete, really interesting Q&A on the website at FODMAP Every Day with the team that you see here. So you can check that out. And of course, you can learn more about the science of FODZYME, the origination story, and more at FODZYME.com. So order your FODZYME today. Hope it works for you. And we're so glad that you joined us. Thank you.